return to office mandates have had no positive effect on financial performance of the firms, none. But the effect has been very robust on attrition. So my interpretation is that RTOs are being used as a tool for voluntary layoffs.
Yeah.
Because then you don't pay full benefits, right? You just announce an RTO, 10% of the company leaves. They're definitely not a tool for productivity. And I think the labor market will force these companies to correct, because in today's environment, you cannot hire with a 5-day in-office work arrangement.
Hey everybody, welcome back to At Work with the Ready, a show about modernizing organizations as the future of work collides with the present moment. I'm Rodney Evans. That guy is Sam Spurlin.
Hello, Rodney Evans.
Hello, Sam. We are so delighted to be joined by Harvard Business School professor Raj Choudhury. Before landing in academia, Raj spent time at IBM, Microsoft, McKinsey, and for the last 2 decades has been researching what the future of work actually looks like from companies that are out there experimenting at the edge. Raj, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Cool. We are here to talk about your new book, The World is Your Office, How Work from Anywhere Boosts Talent, Productivity, and Innovation. But as we always do, we got to check in. Rodney, you're going to ask the check-in question today. What do you got for us?
I hope I don't mess this up. This used to be my job, and then I passed the torch to you, and now I'm really rusty. So our check-in question today is predicated on the assumption, Raj, that you can work from anywhere. Is that true?
I do often, yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Then the question is, and we'll go Sam, then Raj, then me, what is your favorite aspect of being able to work from anywhere? Sam?
All right. So there's lots of things I love about it. But as I was reflecting on it, the main thing I think is having such control over my schedule. And that's not purely a work from anywhere thing. That's also the Ready thing and how we work and how we team and stuff. But the fact that I'm at my best early in the morning. And if I want to get up and like at 6:30, do a few hours and then disappear for a couple hours to work out in the middle of the afternoon and then come back to it. Like I'm not trying to hit a certain train to get to an office so I can be there at a certain time. I can craft my schedule around when I am naturally good.
Nice. Raj, what about you?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what's top of mind. So it has been many things over the years, but top of mind right now, my parents are both in India. They're in Kolkata, and I've shared this on LinkedIn, so it's public. So my dad recently had some health issues. And given the work from anywhere that I do, I was able to be with him during his surgery and his recovery. And I'm just extremely grateful for that opportunity. So I think anyone who has aging parents or other caring responsibilities, the flexibility to live even for short periods of time where you need to, can be just, this is, I'm so thankful to life that I could do this.
I was going to give almost the same answer. My in-laws, we have had a series of health challenges, and being able to work from my mother-in-law's rehab center or their home in the Berkshires when I needed to was extraordinary. But since we both had that one, I will do something different, which is I couldn't probably live here. I live in Durham, North Carolina. We moved here from New York City about 12 years ago. And while there is a lot here, there's a lot of academia and there are companies here. I probably couldn't really have the kind of job that I wanted to have if I had to go into an office. And so the fact that I have the freedom to basically live not only anywhere in the country, but anywhere in the world feels pretty extraordinary to me because I'm pretty particular about the work that I do and what I want to be doing. And to be able to combine that with being able to work in a city that I love just feels like an incredible privilege to have.
Cool. All right. So checked in. We are ready to go. And Raj, I wanted to start by understanding a little bit more your origin story for why this topic, because you were doing research on, working from anywhere pre-COVID. Somebody who maybe just picks up your book would assume like, oh, obviously COVID happened, work from anywhere is a big deal. This guy's jumping on the bandwagon, but you were there way before. And I'm curious, why were you studying that topic when you first got started?
So the way it started is, the question that I started studying 15 years back is, how do organizations access distant talent? And the hypothesis behind that was that talent is everywhere, in every country, every town, every small community, but opportunities are not everywhere. And within that, I think the thing I studied for years was, then how do firms access distant talent? You move talent to wherever you are. So you make them move across the country, you make them move sometimes across the world. And while I was studying migration, I realized that migration can be great for companies and people, but can also be very problematic with all the constraints and the costs of migration. And then about 8 or 9 years back, I started asking, why move people? Why not let people live where they want to live and instead move the work to where they want to live? And I call that work from anywhere.
And before COVID, what were organizations doing? Was it that there was a lot of energy in this area and you had plenty of things to be digging into? Or I would imagine, I guess the hypothesis that I have is that once COVID hit, that really amplified things. So what was it like pre that period of time, pre 2020?
So there were a fair number of companies practicing work from anywhere, and I actually learned a lot from them. So my first study was, among all places, at the United States Patent Office. So they didn't call it work from
you talk about this
anywhere.
one in the book, and I was so surprised. I was not expecting to see something from public sector, kind of U.S. government organization.
Yeah, and actually, work from anywhere, despite what's happening right now, is great for the public sector because the public sector doesn't pay as well. So flexibility becomes your secret weapon, and that's what's happening in Europe. But I was studying the patent office, and they had a 5-year mandate from Congress to go and practice what they call TEEP. But TEEP was essentially work from anywhere. And they wanted some economists to tell them whether it's worked. So I jumped on that, and I did the study around 2018, which showed that the patent office had seen a 4% increase in productivity because of work from anywhere. But the other companies I was studying were these startups, which had no offices, which I called all remote startups. So I studied GitLab before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then I started studying Zapier also before the pandemic.
We've had Sid on the show before from Git. I mean, their culture is just extraordinary and has been. I feel like he and others who sort of architected that operating system were so prescient in their thinking about ways of working and so highly convicted about sort of a documentation first rather than office first culture. I've always found them so fascinating.
Absolutely. And, I should mention Darren Murph. He was the chief remote officer. So they invented the position of the chief remote officer.
I didn't know that.
So Darren was actually one of the brains behind the whole thing. He's at Zillow right now, and he's doing amazing stuff at Zillow with flexible work.
Very cool. I have seen Zillow in the headlines a bunch around this topic. That's so interesting.
Yeah, that is very cool. So then, I guess the experience, if we're ever, I don't mean to do this necessarily chronologically, but for now we'll be chronological. 2020, COVID-19 hits, and suddenly, for many organizations, it's no longer a theory about, whether work from anywhere or work from home or whatever you want to call it, remote working, can or cannot work. But overnight, many organizations, we saw this with our clients, suddenly just had to make it work. So as a scholar in this area, what was that period of time like? Were you giving a lot of advice to organizations? I guess, what were you just noticing as overnight, suddenly work from anywhere just became like how we survive as an organization?
Yeah, so that definitely happened. And one of the studies I did was with Goldman Sachs, and it's published. Yeah. And Goldman Sachs had to do a virtual internship program. So I studied that and it was very effective. But if I may, can I jump in on one point based on your
Please.
question? I feel it's very important to point out the distinction between work from home and work from anywhere.
Yep.
So I have studied work from anywhere, and that's what I'm passionate about. That's what the book is about. It's not the same as work from home. Work from
Yep.
anywhere, like we discussed, is about choosing geography. It's freedom to choose where to live. And once you choose where to live, you could work from home. You could work from a co-working space. You can go and work from a Starbucks, or you can set up a satellite office of the company if a few of you are in the same location. All of that is work from anywhere. And I think
Yeah.
one of the reasons I wrote the book is my fear is many companies will just stop at work from home and some generic, plain vanilla hybrid policy and not really explore the real frontier, which is work from anywhere.
Yeah.
I love the
I
distinction. And I just to say, like, we've talked about this before on this show, but one of our policies as a company has always been around every single member having discretionary spend that they can spend in pursuit of the purpose. And some people, and we had a separate rent policy for a long time. And some people have used that for their own spaces or for co-working. And a lot of us, to your exact point, where we just happen to have some talent density, like in my town, there just happen to be 5 of us who are nearby. We choose to go to a WeWork every other week and spend a day together. And what's interesting about it is, to your point, the fact that it is a choice makes it feel like this very precious and very valuable thing that none of us want to miss. And I know that I schedule trips so that I don't miss the Wednesday co-working because I really enjoy being in person with my teammates. The difference between that and if, for example, I mandated it for the whole organization, to me is night and day. It's like we all value this thing and we all consider it this investment of time and money because we have chosen it for ourselves, and nobody's watching. It's up to us whether to do it or not. And I think that level of agency plays such an important role in work from anywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with every word that you spoke. And, I'm sure we're going to get into this, but one very important thing about in person is the intentionality behind it. And why are you an in person day? And then what you do on the in person day, because, many companies mandate these top down policies, but you go to the office and then you're wearing headphones and getting on Zoom or working on coding, which makes no sense. So on an in person day, it should be an in person day. And there are different things you do on an in person day compared to when you're working from anywhere.
Yeah. Let's dig into that more since we brought it up. What advice do you give to organizations that are trying to figure out how to do in-person days better? So assuming they've already moved on to they already agree that, just mandating that people come to the office and then watching them spend all day on Zoom is not the best use of time. How else should they start thinking about how to use these in-person moments better?
Yeah, so the first thing that I write about in the book is that we need to broaden our idea of what is hybrid. So what most people call hybrid is something I call weekly hybrid. So where you're going to an office or mostly an office to meet your colleagues 2 or 3 days a week. So if you take a step back, there are 2 important decisions on in-person. How frequently we are in in-person situation, and then the venue of in-person. And on both the frequency and the venue, there's a choice. On the frequency, you could decide to meet weekly, but you can also decide to meet monthly or quarterly. And if you're meeting monthly, say for an entire week, then now you can live much farther away because you can then live in Connecticut but drive down to New York once a month and spend 4 days with your colleagues. If you're meeting quarterly, then you can live anywhere in the country and fly down to meet your colleagues once a quarter. On the venue, the office is just one of the choices. You can meet at a co-working space. You can meet at a conference venue. So there's a Cisco sales team that I'm studying. They have decided to meet at every sales conference they all attend because they're
Smart.
there. They'll all go there. They just stay back for a couple of days and do their team meetings after that. And so there are at least two other versions of hybrid that teams should consider, the monthly hybrid model and the quarterly hybrid model. So that's the first thing, that hybrid and monthly and quarterly hybrid allow for work from anywhere. The other thing to think about is what you then do on that in-person day. And like we discussed, it should only be about brainstorming, mentoring, team lunches, team dinners, rituals that lead to culture. It shouldn't be about any individual work on that particular day. And then there are other things that we can talk about that I mentioned in the book about how to design in-person days really effectively.
I have a maybe slight provocation based on the list of activities that you just gave, based on my own experience. So one of the things that we find with a lot of our clients, and I have found this personally, is, it's no secret that most organizations at any scale are experiencing some level of meeting overload. And what we find is that our clients often, especially executives, don't have time really to do the most important thinking, writing, work in their day. And when we work with them to carve out that space, they end up using it for something else or getting pulled into something or distracted. My slightly provocative take for you that I'd love your reaction to is, one of the things that I think is counterintuitive but a valuable use of synchronous time is when we have something we need to make, an asset, a plan, a roadmap, a communication, etc. And we have some social accountability because we are physically in the same space while we are working on it, and we can get rapid feedback from somebody sitting across the table. This also works on Zoom. I do it a lot in Zoom too. But one of the things that I love about my Wednesdays is I will often sit with a colleague and we will use that time to trade drafts back and forth so that we can really ship something within an hour rather than just ideating and then having everybody leave to theoretically complete it individually. What do you think about that? Waste of in-person time?
No, so I think every team and every person needs to find their, what works best for them. But what I have come to believe is that the best use of in-person time is to build social connections. It's to do two things. One is to build deep trust among teams that are going to be working very closely, and then getting to know a little bit about a lot of other people. So those are what I call the deep ties and the broad ties. So with the deep ties, the folks that you're going to be spending the entire project with, you need to develop trust. Because once you trust each other, then you can be virtual on Zoom, on any platform. It's going to be fine. And then you need to know a little bit about a lot of people. And that is a problem of in-person. Because typically in in-person settings, think about the old office. And it's funny how we now call it the old office, right? But there's research dating back 40 years which shows that people interact within 25 meters of where they sit. So that means, and there's actually a researcher from MIT, Tom Allen, who drew out this Allen curve to show that if you are in different floors of the same building, you're much less likely to meet. If you're in different buildings of the same campus, you will never have a serendipitous conversation. So that means in-person typically happens in silos. The other thing that in-person is affected by is what we call homophily. That when we go to any in-person events, we tend to mingle with people just like us. So women with women, we have these ethnic subgroups. Indians are immediately drawn to other Indians. And this is something that's subconscious or, just that's human nature. So the elegance of in-person is if you can counter homophily and counter the local bias and make connections that are diverse. Because, if you think about innovation, what drives innovation is diverse ties.
Right.
If you know a little bit about what that adjacent team is doing, you can create something that's new, right? So just getting to know a little bit about other teams and hanging out with people you would not normally hang out with. And I know this is a long answer, but in the book I talk about this as engineering serendipity. That we need to not only If you leave people to their own devices, they're going to be drawn to people just like them. So we need to engineer serendipity in ways that people are making diverse connections.
As a just like quick side note, and I just have a really quick follow up on that one, Sam, before you take it away. The first study that I ever saw on homophily, which was years and years ago, was about the strength of connection between smokers that all worked in the same company, which I thought was wild, but made sense. Everybody is out on the curb at the same time doing the same activity. It seems to be the thing that cuts across other identities. But to that point, I am curious, when you talk about engineering serendipity, what are some other ways to break out of that tendency that is so very human?
So in the Zapier study, what we found was that, so we studied this offsite at Zapier. So they sent all employees and we observed who's speaking to whom on Slack before and after. So we know if you've made a new connection after the retreat. And we found two things. We found that people made new connections, but with people who were ethnically similar to them or had the same gender. So there were these gender and ethnic homophily biases. The only way it was broken was if the two Zapier employees traveled in the same cab from the airport to the retreat. Because if you're sitting in the back of a cab, then you just open up no matter who it is, and then you make a new connection. So, that's an example of engineering serendipity. I'm sure other people can come up with creative ways to do that.
Well, what I was going to throw in is just reflecting on something we've done with our own retreats as a work from anywhere company that comes together, at least twice a year as a full organization. One of the things that we've done in the last couple of years that I've really enjoyed is the small group dinners where you are assigned to the group. There's no finding others to go eat dinner with. Here's your group. And it's always a group of people who I probably wouldn't have chosen just because I don't know them as well. But those are some of my favorite memories from our recent retreats. Those conversations, those dinners are a great way for breaking that up.
Yep.
I feel like I keep coming back to the COVID moment, not because I don't. It's so interesting to me because I feel like there could have been this alternative future where this was the great launching point, and now everybody is really stoked about work from anywhere, and we're really pushing forward and figuring out how to do it really well. And some organizations did get launched that way, I think. But it feels like, and maybe this is just my LinkedIn feed, is there's this ongoing debate about return to work, which is a horrible phrase, or return to the office, or making this case for this fictional past that we need to somehow recreate now that we're on the other side of COVID. And I'm just wondering, have you felt that, seen that? How do you think about kind of where we have landed in this moment now where it is mostly in our rearview mirror?
Yeah, so I'll say a few things there. So I think, yes, of course, I get also similar LinkedIn feed messages. But, if you look at the data, because as an academic, I'm drawn to data and data speaks the truth. Let me mention a few things. The first thing is the Flex Index data has now shown that about 2/3 of American companies have strongly adopted flexible work. So that's a very large number. So that's... The other thing, the other piece of data is that if you read the surveys of remote work days, and there are multiple sources. There's the Nick Bloom et al. Survey, which is very well done. But there's the American Time Use Survey. There is the BLS survey. There's the survey of where mobile phone ping data comes from in the middle of the workday. Office swipe data from Castle. All of them are pointing out that the percentage of remote days has gone up 5 times since 2020, and it is extremely stable. It's extremely stable. So the RTOs have not moved that number. Yeah. So what that tells me is that for every Amazon or Dell, the underreported stories are Dropbox shutting all of its offices, NVIDIA, Atlassian, and Airbnb, but thousands of startups really adopting this model. And the final thing I'll say is that on the return to office, the research is now quite robust. Return to office mandates have had no positive effect on financial performance of the firms, none. And this is a study coming out of Pittsburgh. But the effect has been very robust on attrition. So return to office has been accompanied by about 10% of the company leaving, about 12% women, and 7% men. So my interpretation is that RTOs are being used as a tool for voluntary layoffs. Because then you don't pay full benefits, right? You just announce an RTO, 10% of the company leaves. They're definitely not a tool for productivity. And I think the labor market will force these companies to correct, because in today's environment, you cannot hire with a 5-day in-office work arrangement.
That brings up two questions for me. The first is, you answered it, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. I think of RTO generally as being a distraction and kind of nonsense, because there is just an overwhelming preponderance of data that suggests that if you are a leader who gives a shit about performance, even if you don't care about culture, which you should because they're related, but even if you don't, the data is like the receipts are in that like RTO is not the thing that is going to get you high performance. And so to me, I'm always curious about like, okay, well, what is that a distraction from? Like we're very focused on this. What's really going on under the hood? The voluntary layoff thing is right there. Like I absolutely think that is one of the things going on that like, it's like, look over here at the RTO policy. And what we're really looking at is cost savings through involuntary attrition that we're not paying real severance for. Are there other things like that you think are happening that you think RTO is a distraction from?
Sure. There are many legacy policies. So, companies have invested in these 30-year leases. Some companies have real estate investments. Some companies have taken money from regions and cities to build up offices and headquarters and whatnot. And now if they say they're going to adopt work from anywhere, they'll have to give that money back. But all of this is, as an economist, my view is very clear that all of this is ephemeral. In the long run, it's all about attracting and retaining talent. And so there is going to be a future CEO of the same companies and the future boards, which will have to retract. Because in today's macro environment, if you don't offer flexible work practices, you will not be up in the talent game. So it's not sustainable.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear your take a little bit more on, so we've been talking about like policies at kind of the organizational level. And anytime I think about work from anywhere, and this is just my bias, I go to thinking about the individuals. And I'm curious about your take on kind of self-management in the sense of like individuals managing themselves, self-leadership, kind of the skills and behaviors that maybe become more pronounced when you're in a work from anywhere environment than if you were working in an office every day.
So I honestly think that, work from anywhere is orthogonal to that. So in any organization, we have employees who have greater intrinsic motivation. And there are some employees that will shirk, and the argument that I have is that even if you called back everyone to the office, there'll be some people who will shirk. They will have their laptop open, but they'll not be really working. And for far too long, the mistake that we have done is to measure productivity or performance based on how the input to work, how many days we work, how many hours we work, how many times our manager sees our face, how many meetings we attend. All of that is honestly irrelevant. The only thing to measure is the quality of your work, the output. And if an organization can do that, then it doesn't matter where people live. First of all, if you have hired a shirker, that's a hiring mistake. You need to figure out better next time. And if you have not made your performance measurement output based, then some people will always shirk or have a pretense of working. So it's confounding work from anywhere with the problem of performance management and hiring, which is a very different set of problems.
And problems that exist regardless of what your actual arrangement is.
They exist regardless. And I would argue that if you have underperformance and it's being measured in these very explicit ways, like with badge swipes or keystrokes or whatever, presumably you're taking a manager's attention and focusing it on the wrong trappings of underperformance anyway. So you're compounding the issue because you have a poor performer, whether they're at home or on the beach or in the office, but with the kind of measurement that goes with the office, you're pointing the manager who should be figuring this out at exactly the wrong data to look at. I
I
actually
totally.
think, and potentially you have somebody in the office who's a slacker who is also then more likely to be distracting other people. Like I know
Yeah.
as someone who used to manage a very traditional team, I would have preferred an underperformer to not be around because they make everybody else worse. I'd rather that person, while I'm in the process of helping to fix it or managing them out, I'd rather that they're not there, kind of like pulling the team down.
Yeah, agree 100%.
Could we talk a little bit more about digital twins? Because it is
Oh,
a concept that I feel like
so
we have
cool.
not really talked about at the Ready at all. And we're pretty deep in the world of like work from anywhere and helping organizations set up operating systems where they can work effectively. But I feel like I just don't know a lot about digital twins. So bring us into that concept and tell us why it's so cool.
Yeah, no, it's a very exciting phenomena, and it's a very real phenomena. Unlike the metaverse, where I don't see a lot of real world.
I want to ask you about the metaverse later, but maybe this answer will prevent that.
Yeah, no, I've been tracking digital twins for a while now. So the idea is that it's a combination of sensors, automation, and AI, where you create a digital copy of any physical operation on your computer. So it could be a factory, it could be a hospital ER room, it could be an airport with all the messy conveyor belts, it could be a farm. And then because you have sensors that share data in real time to the cloud, you can see that operation on your computer screen. And then you have AI algorithms predicting how to run the operation. So for a farm, how much water needs to go, that depends on the humidity today, which is being measured in real time. For a power plant, what should be the turbine speed? That depends on how much we need to produce today, how much the grid wants from us. And once you have that operation online on your computer, then not everyone needs to be physically there. And so I have three examples of this in the book from my research. One was at a Unilever detergents factory in Brazil. And on the day of the pilot, that factory was run from miles away from the kitchen table of the technician. And then the second example I have in the book is this Turkish power generation company. So they have 24 power plants all across Turkey. And the main problem was none of the top engineers or technicians wanted to go and live in those places because these are small villages with no schools or no restaurants and no amenities. So everyone wanted to live in Istanbul, the big city. So they built a digital twin headquarters in Istanbul where they are running 24 power plants all across the country from one room.
Amazing.
And the amazing thing that's happened there is now they're becoming a tech company. So earlier they were a power generation company selling power to the grid. Now they're selling digital twin licenses to Qatari and Saudi power plants on how to transform their power plants. And the final example I have in the book are the New York hospital, the emergency rooms, the virtual emergency rooms. And so what they did across the state of New York is they created virtual rooms where the doctors were able to observe the patients from a distance because the patients had sensors and the beds of the patients had sensors. And my doctoral student found that the patient outcomes improved for a vast majority of patients. And the doctors were taking shifts. So some doctors would be in person, some doctors would be at home. So it's happening across hospitals, power plants, factories, farmlands. This is a phenomena that's just, I think, we are the tip of, and this is going to be like extremely, extremely exciting to observe over the next few years.
In that healthcare example, I'm curious to learn a little bit more. I would hypothesize like maybe the same kind of patient outcomes, but you get the benefit of, you're being able to do it from afar. But you said it was better patient outcomes. I'm curious, did the research kind of penetrate that at all?
Yes. So what the research found was the patient outcomes improved for everyone except for the sickest patients and the healthiest patients. And the reason given by the doctors was when a patient is a screen, they know where to focus attention on. And their logic was very elegant. It was, if you are a really healthy patient, you don't need our attention. If you're just sitting in the ER, but nothing has really happened to you, you don't need attention. If you are a really, really sick patient in the ER, God bless you, but even a lot of attention won't make you better. So what they were able to do, because every patient was a computer screen, was a tile on their computer screen, was they could prioritize the patients in the middle. And they gave more attention to those patients in the middle, and all of those patients improved.
That's so fascinating. And when we read about, the people keep saying that there is a coming shortage that's creating a crisis. I would argue that that crisis is already here in the healthcare system, at least in the United States, but I'm sure in many other countries as well. I this is an interesting place to think about how something like a digital twin can start to close that shortage, because I don't see a world in which medical schools are going to produce the number of nurses, doctors, et cetera, that our aging population is going to require. There's going to have to be a technological solution. Do you see it that way, or do you see it as like doctors should be worried because there won't be enough jobs?
No, I absolutely feel that the same principles that dictate why work from anywhere is good for office workers dictates why work from anywhere is good for the hospital and the patient-doctor relationships. I'll just give you my personal example. I think this model, this telemedicine model, is absolutely critical for a country like India. Because if you think about commute in an Indian city, large Indian city, it's terrible. So, and then my dad, who had recently surgery, for a follow-up visit, he had to commute for 2 hours and then sit in the hospital patient waiting area for another 2 hours to be seen for 10 minutes. So 4 hours of commute for a recovering patient to be seen for 10 minutes makes no sense. The alternative would have been for a technician to be sent to the home, collect all the data. The data could be uploaded to the cloud, and the doctor could observe the heartbeat, whatnot, on the cloud and make a diagnosis. So I think this is absolutely, the healthcare system in a country like India will break without something like this happening.
I was trying to embody kind of a pessimist or a cynic who's listening to us talk, and I was going to say something about, well, aren't we describing some sort of dystopia where healthcare is happening all through screens? Like, where's the human to human touch? And then you tell a story like that where, okay, sure, your dad got some human to human touch for 10 minutes after 4 hours of really rough commute and waiting, and it's pretty easy to make the case that what we're describing with digital twins is a far more human way of providing that care.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about digital twins, AI, work from anywhere, a very different landscape of a talent workforce than what has preceded us for 130 years in the US. If you were working in a company right now, in a large organization right now, and you were responsible for workforce planning, what would you be thinking about? What would you be doing? Where do you think this is headed in like the next 5 years? Because what I see out there is a lot of hand waving and a lot of concern and not a lot of clarity around really how to think about the coming workforce that looks a lot different than what it's looked like.
Yeah, so that's a really it's a profound question, but I can tell you what's sort of like one of the things among many that I think about all the time. And I don't know if this answers the question, but tell me. So one of the things I've thought about for a long, long time is how work from anywhere solves the problem for smaller towns. Because, for decades, smaller towns in this country, but around the world, have seen brain drain to the large cities. So if you're a young kid in a smaller town, you immediately after high school, you leave, you do college somewhere, and then you get a job in LA or New York or Austin, and you never come back.
Yeah.
And I would argue that brain drain is at least partly responsible for many of the problems we have in the country, like the divide between the coastal elites and the heartland, right?
Right.
All the political discourse, why do we care if elite institutions are under attack? Because, they're not part of our lives. And in Work from Anywhere, and I've studied this with one community, the Tulsa, Oklahoma community, for years now, is now you have uh, these really talented remote workers coming and settling down in these smallest communities. And I think that can be a game changer. So there are 50 cities right now across the US where they have incentive programs for remote workers. So if you're a remote worker, Tulsa will pay you $10,000 to go live there. Topeka, Kansas would pay you $12,000 to go and live there. And they'll give you a mountain bike. And now these communities are competing for remote workers. And Tulsa so far has managed to get 4,000 people. And we published our study. It has been amazing for Tulsa and for these remote workers. So, I think just to summarize, I see a vision in 10 years or 20 years where talent is far more distributed across the country, where it's not just about living in LA or New York or Austin or Boston, and smaller towns get rejuvenated. And I think that's going to be amazing for the large cities to get a little less congestion, and it's going to be amazing for the smaller towns.
I totally agree. In terms of the outcome being net positive, but I lived in New York for a long time, in New York City for a long time. And, I go back there now, I look at the prices that young people have to pay who are on entry level salaries. Rent is just completely out of control. And I fundamentally don't believe that every person in America who wants to have a great career is necessarily well suited to live in a giant city. Like, that lifestyle is not for everyone. And I can understand now, having left one, why that is. And I love the vision that a different and more technology enabled way of working could start to not only distribute talent, but distribute access to a lifestyle that is not living in a shoebox for $4,000 a month and taking on debt in order to have any kind of social life.
Absolutely agree. And the beauty of the model is, if you love Broadway, come and live in that shoebox. But
Sure.
if you are a young family with 3 kids and you want a bigger house, then go and live in Tulsa.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's really interesting. And what about in terms of AI? I got to ask, how are you thinking about AI and talent?
Yeah, so it's a big part of what I'm studying. So what I'm now studying is a digital twin of the person. So you can't not only have a digital twin of a factory or a farm or a warehouse, you can now have, because of Gen AI, these personal bots that can mimic any of us. And so I have an ongoing study where we created a personal bot for Wade Foster. So Wade Foster is the CEO of Zapier. And about 2 years back, I suggested to Wade, why don't we make a bot for you? And we did. And then we ran an experiment in Wade's company where Zapier employees ask questions, and the answer comes from either the human Wade or the bot Wade. And what we found in that study was that the bot was extremely good. They could identify the source correctly only 59% times, which is just better than flipping a coin. So that's
just barely. Yeah.
It's passing the Turing test with flying colors. So with today's technology, we could create a bot for any one of us. And what that means for Work from Anywhere is now in a short-term future, these bots will be taking part in meetings. These bots will attend 5 meetings at the same time. The bots will not be constrained by time zones. So even when the CEO is flying in an aircraft, the bot could be participating in meetings in Hong Kong and in Kansas City. So we're going to scale human capital like never before, and we're going to slightly more overcome the constraints of time zones. So I think these bots, once deployed, will make us even more better able to work from anywhere with distributed teams.
Am I a small person because my brain goes to, and then what does human Sam do if when bot Sam is going to 5 meetings at a time? Does human Sam have a job anymore or a role? Or I mean, how do you think about that? How does human Wade feel that this bot
question.
is basically as good as him?
No, it's a great question. So the nuance of our study was that the bot could do the job really well, but then we asked another question, and the question was, how helpful was this answer? And what we find there is evidence of what's been called algorithm aversion. That if the Zapier employee thought this was a bot, and their guess may be incorrect, but if they thought this was a bot, they found the answer less helpful. And so, and that pattern was even more strong, was actually more salient if the Q&A related to a personal topic. So if the question was about what is your, what's the sales strategy for next year, people are okay with the bot answering.
Sure. But that's the type of thing you could look up in a handbook to the GitLab example. If it's an objective piece of information, who cares if it comes from a bot or from the human?
Yeah. So to answer your question, I think 2 things will happen. These bots will be used for rather impersonal Q&A, which will save, 30%, 40% of emails to be responded. And in that, the time that's saved, the CEOs can now actually do some deep thinking. Because if you ask CEOs, their biggest complaint is not having time. And so now I can imagine a future where the bot becomes like an executive assistant, takes away 30 to 40% of the low-hanging fruit communication, and the CEO can engage in much deeper thinking, or actually reading up on the latest industry report, or having like a really, really thoughtful conversation with a colleague.
Yeah, I love the optimism of that, and I can see that future potentially coming true. I think it's definitely wouldn't be a given, considering conversations that you and I have had, Rodney, around how even when we have helped CEOs create more time, they don't necessarily fill it with that deep thinking work, because that is really hard work. I mean, if you have the option of like thinking really hard and doing some like fundamental rethinking of your industry, or like send off a few more emails, sometimes sending off those few more emails is the thing. Most of the time, it is the thing to be done. But I love the idea that using AI to create more space to do the things that are, for now, only humans can do and do well. We hope we aspire to that.
Well, I think that, to your point, Sam, like, I think this is where the transformative aspect of AI gets really interesting in a human sense, because what I mostly see is the binary of like folks arguing about whether AI is taking jobs or not. And I think all of us in this room agree that what AI will do is fundamentally shift the composite of jobs and what the human role is in work. And to me, because of how organizations have run, and I include startups in this because of often the level of chaos and the lack of sort of systems thinking, and bureaucracies because of the level of sludge and organizational debt and sort of institutionalized helplessness and idiocy. It is going to require a fundamental shift for workers of the future to do this more meaningful work, because most people that we're around don't do that much of it. And they say that they want to, and they say that it's a time constraint, but I think it is deeper than that. It's a skills constraint. It's an org design constraint. It is a capacity constraint to some extent. But what I'm wondering about is like, when AI makes the time and there is 30%, how do people make the leap to doing the work that you're describing, Raj? Because I don't think it will just happen for most.
No, it's a great question. And, I've not studied it, but, just to share some high level, thinking aloud. So I think it's a great point. So, the parallel may be that even pre-AI, there were other resources that CEOs could use, or frankly, any one of us could use. And not all of us use those resources really well. So, the ability to leverage is something that some people do very well and some people don't do at all. So if I think about my research colleagues, some of them are extremely good in using research assistants. And some of them are just so micro, they would just not be able to trust an RA to look at a piece of statistical code without them probing 5 times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just going to be the same. Some CEOs will do extremely well with leveraging this AI tool, and some CEOs will not. And I think we need a lot more research to figure out what kind of CEO personality traits make you more amenable to use this profitably.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm super curious about that area and to sort of see what happens, because I think we've seen too many times when there is new slack in the system that it gets applied to the wrong things, or not the most impactful things.
All right, so I always love to ask anytime we have academics on the show, or I find myself in a conversation, is just to hear you talk a little bit about, like, what are you excited about in terms of your next phase of research? What questions are you digging into that you're really, whether or not you have any results to share yet, but just what are the questions that you're really excited about?
Yeah, so there are 2 things, and we've talked about both. So my
cool.
next few years of research will be about trying to understand the digital twin phenomena much better, and understanding what it means for reskilling, upskilling, because these engineers sitting in the Turkish power plant company, now they are becoming different kinds of workers. Earlier, they were turbine engineers, and now they are machine learning engineers with deep knowledge of turbine technology. So it's a very different kind of electrical engineer. So I'm going to be spending a lot of time trying to understand what the doctor sitting at home needs as a skill set compared to the doctor in the hospital.
Right.
And the other topic that's going to be my life for the next few years is the Smaller Towns Project. Because I feel I really, really believe in it. I feel if work from anywhere can really move the needle on that and spread talent to smaller towns, there'll be so many positive benefits. One thing we didn't talk about is how you're more likely to make real connections in smaller towns compared to large cities. So when I walk in the Tulsa downtown, like, everyone knows everyone. That doesn't happen in my Boston neighborhood. So I just feel for human happiness and for everything that, preserving resources, for the environment, for equity, for just like the feeling of, we don't have to pack our lives to get a career. Smaller towns need to be a focus of researchers and policymakers.
I love that. I love the shift of focus in this being away from like organizational effectiveness, which obviously what Rodney and I think about all the time, to more so like societal effectiveness. Like broadening that perspective feels really hopeful to me.
Agreed.
Yep.
I think this hopeful note is a perfect place for us to wrap it up. Raj, it was so great having you today. Thank you so much for coming. Where can our listeners find you and learn more about your research?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn. Look me up there. And the new book, of course, is called The World is Your Office. And I'm sure you guys will put a link to it.
We absolutely
Sure
will. Thank
Well,
you
thanks
so
for
much for
having me
coming
today.
on. Absolutely.
Well, we're always looking for new topics for this show. So if you have an organizational pattern that you're having trouble changing, shoot us a note at podcast@theready.com.
This show and all our shows were engineered by Taylor Marvin and produced by our friend Jack Van Amberg. At Work with the Ready is created by The Ready, where we help organizations around the world change the way that they work. Thank you so much for listening.